It's been said that one of the great things about living in a large urban area is that you're never very far from a cappuccino. There's one right across the street. We also have underground pipes bringing us water and taking away our waste. But we're also in some danger. If any of those systems break down, we can't last for very long. We can't last without electricity, water, and food. And that's why it's important to have a 72-hour kit so you can stay put. And it's important to have a go bag so you can get going if you have to evacuate. The Mackenzie Institute is interested in safety and security of all types, and today on Throwback Thursday, we're going to take a look at the water supply. Hello, I'm Allan Bonner, and welcome to At Issue. We all know what water is, a clear, odorless, tasteless liquid that we can't live without. It's so plentiful that Earth is called the blue planet. But fresh water is remarkably finite as a resource, and it's not evenly distributed everywhere or to everyone. Whether it's its abundance or its absence, we see the effects of water in every corner of the globe and in every aspect of our daily lives. Yeah. How much of the Earth is covered with fresh water that we can drink?
It's only about 9%, I believe.
And where does that water come from? We know the Great Lakes are a huge supply.
Lakes, the rivers, think of the River Nile, think of the Mississippi River, but all that is really a very small proportion of water compared to the oceans.
Right. Actually, 70% of water is contained in glaciers and ice caps, and about 30% is held in underground sources, so the aquifers below the earth, and then what we can actually see the surface freshwater is only about 0.3% of what's out there.
Okay, so despite the fact that we in Canada can turn a tap on and get all we want, this is a finite resource that is not all that plentiful, hard to get at too.
That's right.
You raised the interesting question of, does water affect politics or does politics affect water? Your view?
Well, I think it goes both ways, but I think that water should affect politicians, because if I were a politician running this country, I would have concern about how we waste our water. The average water that we use in this country is 325 liters per person. I know of one town not too far from here, it's up to 500 liters. And for me, it is totally irresponsible that we still have municipalities where we don't have water meters. And so,
do any municipalities charge for the amount of water individuals use?
No,
it's pretty rare.
You pay for water services. You don't actually pay for the water that you consume.
But what would be wrong? Like at my home, I have a smart meter for electricity, and I pay graduating rates. And like if I do my dishes or the laundry after 11 o'clock at night, I get a cheaper rate than if I do it in the daytime. And I think that we need to start looking at water meters, smart water meters, because unless it hits your pocketbook, we're going to continue to have teenagers.
But then you're charging people for a necessity of life.
Well, right. I think in North America we should.
I think what the problem really is the corporate takeover of our water. So if we look at water consumption, a lot of it actually comes from, and water pollution, and a lot of it comes from, bottled water corporations that have access to our water for.
Okay, but let's stick with the individual just for a second. Do you agree that people should be charged for drinking water?
Well, I think water is a human right. And so if we're going to apply this internationally, there are lots of people who won't be able to afford to pay for water. Now, it's not to say that there shouldn't be any water metering system at all, but if we look at what the problem really is, it is unsustainable industrial use. It's unsustainable.
But you agree with charging
agricultural
for
practices.
Yeah, I do. I slightly disagree with our guest. I think that in the West, I'm not talking about Africa where there's a scarcity of water and where they don't have the resources, but I think in a country like ours, absolutely. And I think we should have smart water meters, and where I get charged a very basic nominal amount, because I do agree that water is a human right. I mean, we can't live without air, and we can live without water for about, 48 hours. So that needs to be a human right. But we need to get a handle on how we waste our water. It takes 174,000 liters to build a car. Did you know that?
Okay, general attitudinal question. We use twice as much water, the average person, as the average person in France does. 3 times as much as the average German, 8 times as much as the average Dane. Why is that? Why does Europe seem to be more sensitive to water usage than we?
Well, I just spent 2 weeks in Holland, and we rented a cottage, and I noticed what they did. They actually charged us for the amount of water that we used. They charged us for an environmental fee, for the garbage that we created. They charged us for every sheet that needed to be washed. And at first I was irritated, being a North American, and then when I got to thinking about it, I thought, that is the answer. Because they reminded me that water was a scarcity, and that when they had to launder everything, that was all costing energy. So I think that there's a much greater awareness in Europe of the scarcity of water. They've seen the big river Rhine and the IJssel and the Maas, all the big rivers. They've seen them polluted. And in fact, they're really becoming aware of global warming. In Holland right now, and it's just because I happened to have been there a few weeks ago, they're re-dredging their canals so that more transportation can be done by barge instead of by trucks. And so I think it's just a whole attitude.
Now, we've also, compared to other developed industrialized nations, big countries, the OECD, the ones that we compete with, we're using more, and our use is accelerating, I believe, faster than those other countries. Why would that be?
Well, because we need to charge for more water. You'd be more aware, but for water bottling, recently the Ontario government instituted a charge. I couldn't believe the nominal charge for bottling water. Are you familiar with the cost?
I don't remember the specific cost.
It was something like, 50 cents maybe for 10,000 liters. Like, it was such an amount that I thought, is it even worth the accounting to charge it? So that's where it needs to change.
What would be the specific manifestation of water being a human right look like?
Well, in Canada, I think better quality water in First Nations reserves. Actually, when we talk about Canada having excellent drinking water standards, that's not the reality on many First Nations reserves. So, that would be number one, to have access to drinking water, clean drinking water, and sanitation across this country consistently. So that would be the one, and secondly, to recognize, if water is a human right, then it can't also be a corporate right. So taking away, the rights that corporations have under our trade deal with the United States and Mexico, the North American Free Trade Agreement, that's very incompatible with this model, or the perspective that water is a human right. Under NAFTA, it's actually defined not as a human right, but as an investment and as a service. So that would be part of it.
Gary, you can add to that list, or you can also add what can be done internationally to make more potable, safe water available to more people.
Well, I'd like to go back to our municipalities. First of all, about 13 to 35% of our water in Canada, depending on the municipalities, is being lost by old infrastructures. I live in Ottawa, and last winter they had 2 main pipes burst, and one of them was 110 years old. I couldn't believe how long. So number one, I totally agree with you. We need to put resources behind our municipalities. Secondly, I think we need to start supporting our municipalities. I'm glad there's a movement afoot to be more supportive of the municipalities and them providing clean water. I just saw the stat for Ottawa, and that's the community that I'm most familiar with. Our water in all the outlining areas and everything was rated one of the best in Canada. But we need to support that. I still go back to education. We need to educate ourselves, and we need to start realizing that water is a precious resource. And so we need to deal with that. Even basic things like putting timers on our showers. They sell them in Australia, and they go off after like 3 minutes or 4 minutes.
I'm Allan Bonner. See you next time. Any views expressed here are not necessarily those of the Mackenzie Institute, its speakers, sponsors, or supporters. But the Institute is dedicated to fostering public discussion, debate, and education about security matters. Google the Mackenzie Institute to join the discussion. The Mackenzie Institute is grateful to its sponsors and supporters. Some of our short pods and long talks are a result of the support of Heathbridge Capital Management Limited, the National Post, and Dundurn Publishing.